And we turn to Florida, where a verdict was reached in the trial of Michael Dunn, the 47-year-old who shot and killed teenager Jordan Davis. On Saturday, the jury in Jacksonville found Michael Dunn guilty of attempted second-degree murder for opening fire on 3 teens who were in the same SUV as Jordan Davis. However, they could not come to a consensus on whether to convict or acquit Dunn of the most serious of charges, first-degree murder in the 2012 killing. Prosecutors argued that Dunn recklessly shot at the teens after complaining about the volume of their music in a convenience store parking lot. 3 of his 10 shots struck Davis, one of them cutting through his liver, a lung, and his aorta. However, Dunn testified that his actions were all in self-defense, that Davis threatened him, and that he thought he saw a gun sticking out of the vehicle that held Davis and his friends. Dunn was found guilty on 4 of the 5 counts he was charged with and now faces up to 60 years behind bars. To discuss this more, I was joined earlier by RT's Nicholas O'Donovan, who is in Florida and has been following this trial very closely. I first asked him to break down the charges that Dunn was found guilty of.
Yes, 4 out of 5, but probably the most important thing here isn't what he was found guilty of, but what the jury couldn't decide on. Not so much in sentence terms, because that's not going to change too much, I'll explain that later, but more in moral, social, even legal terms. The first-degree murder charge for killing 17-year-old Jordan Davis was mistrial. Jurors simply couldn't reach a verdict on that. But after asking the judge if a mistrial on that one charge would affect the rest of the charges, the judge let them know that that wasn't the case, that the rest of the charges could simply be trialed as normal, and then the jurors proceeded. Conclusion: Michael Dunn was found guilty on 3 charges of attempted second-degree murder for opening fire on 3 other teens that we remember were in the same SUV as Jordan Davis. He was also found guilty of 1 count of shooting, throwing deadly missiles for shooting in the red Dodge Durango carrying, the teens. But there was a deadlock on the murder charge against him in the Jordan Davis case.
And Nicholas, going off of what you were just saying, the mistrial, the jury couldn't come to a decision on that. I know they deliberated for a very long time. What were the points of contention in this case that the jury really had to weigh?
A very long time indeed. After 30 hours of deliberation, the jury couldn't decide if Michael Dunn was guilty or innocent of that first-degree murder. There was obviously a lot of discussion. They worked very, very hard, 30 hours, as we say, and they had to take into consideration many, many facts. But once again, the basic question here is, how can a juror, another human being, know when an individual feels for his life or feels that his life is actually threatened? Therefore, if a defendant comes up with what we can say a more or less credible story, the bottom line is he is the only one that knows if his life was an immediate threat, because the other person obviously is not there to tell their side of the story. In some cases, we can see how a defendant says that he mistakes a candy bar or a can of iced tea for a weapon, or he can just simply say that he saw something that looked like a gun. Even if this wasn't a stand-your-ground case, the jurors were instructed about this law, and they could have just reached the conclusion that, if the law says that when somebody's threatened, you can simply just use their deadly force, then they could have just reached the conclusion that Michael Dunn did the right thing according to the law. Right.
Well, let's talk about some of the reaction after the verdict was read. Do you think people who were seeking justice for Jordan Davis are satisfied with this outcome?
Well, obviously there has been, an enormous reaction to this case and to the mistrial. We haven't seen, though, the outrage that followed the Zimmerman trial, but the truth is that George Zimmerman walked away and that Michael Dunn was not only convicted of those 3 charges of attempted second-degree murder, but he could still face a retrial of that first-degree murder charge. So Jordan Davis's mother, for instance, said that she was happy that there was some sort of closure, but others are simply just frustrated, that Michael Dunn will not pay for the moment for that, for what they think is a clear case of first-degree murder. We have seen a very strong online support group demanding justice for Jordan Davis. We now know there's also a website and a Facebook page demanding justice for Michael Dunn. So once again, a case involving the killing of a young African-American is starting to be polarised. Both sides of the story obviously will just simply represent two very different ways of looking at the justice system here in America.
And Nicholas, what's next at this point for Michael Dunn? There's a trial that's going to be coming. Do we know when that's going to happen?
Well, that's a very good question. The first thing we have to do is, let's start with what we do know that's going to happen to him. No, he's going to spend a long, long time in prison, that's for sure. Each attempted second-degree murder conviction carries a minimum sentence of at least 20 years, that's 60 years or so. Then what we still don't know is if he will eventually be, facing a new trial for the murder of Jordan Davis. If finally he is convicted for that charge, he could obviously spend life in prison without parole. But as I say, we still don't exactly know if and when that second trial could happen, although prosecutors have already said that it's a very, very possible scenario.
All right. Well, we'll have to wait and see if he is indeed convicted on that last murder charge. Appreciate your reporting, RT's Nicholas O'Donovan.